The Tim Dev Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tim Dev Show. On this week's episode, I'm going to retouch with the Tim Dev Show's earlier episode on Saturday about the biased Canadian history of a Canadian and try and remake that video because it was rushed and I wasn't too pleased with it. So let's begin. So in 1864, they had the Charlottetown Conference, and it was mostly the maritime provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI. And they were all like, let's go to the Charlottetown Conference. Well, Canada's heard about it, and they were all like, let us join, please, woo! So they were like, okay. And Newfoundland heard about it as well, and they were like, hey, let's join too, but it was too late by then. So they were like, sorry, Newfoundland, you missed the cut. And I guess when they arrived in Charlottetown on September 1st through September 9th, there is a circus going on. And apparently the city's population was more interested in the circus than the delegation for creating a unified state. So there wasn't a lot of room for all the delegates. The maritime delegates got lodging in Charlottetown, but the delegates from the Canadas had to sit and stay on their ship in port during the nights. And during the talks, they talked about creating a kind of like federation and unifying all the colonies of British North America into a confederacy. They agreed to meet again in October in Quebec. And every night there was a party or a ball, I guess. And there was still the circus going on, so I guess it was a really rowdy place. Not the case anymore. Charlottetown is a pathetic little town and a pathetic little province. But then it was probably a happening place. I don't know. Anyway, they then went to Quebec in October of 1864, and they were there for a lot longer than they were in Charlottetown. And this is where they decided to come up with a confederacy, and they wanted to make one that was more centralized and less provincial because of, obviously, during this time the American Civil War was going on, and they were afraid that if they made it more provincial power and less central, they would also get a civil war down the line. Some provinces, like the Maritimes and Lower Canada or Quebec, wanted to have more provincial power than centralized government because they feared that their cultural identity would be forgotten, I guess. Sir John A. Macdonald, who would become Canada's first Prime Minister, he was one of the supporters of a more centralized country than a supporter of a more provincialized and a loose central government. I guess what happened was they joined forces or something, I don't fucking know. But regardless, a compromise was met. They created the House of Commons and the Senate. And they went off to go and get it approved. Newfoundland had people here, but they were only observers, so they couldn't speak. And so they were just kind of like, whatever. Also, in the Charlottetown Conference, the Canadas dominated the conference on both ends, I believe. But in the Charlottetown one, which was originally created by the Maritimes, the Canadas were just like, screw you guys are stupid. Fishing and all that nonsense. And they dominated the conference, and the Maritimes didn't actually get to speak their part until September 6th and 7th. So from September 1st to September 6th, you just heard from the Canadian delegates. And in the Quebec conference, it was probably again the same case, but PEI voiced their outrage and did not actually join the Confederacy for that reason. They never invited British Columbia to join the talks, and like I said, Newfoundland had an observer, but they decided against it. Well, I don't even know what Newfoundland did. I don't even think they really got the letter, because I mean, they just had a guy that sat there and watched. I mean, he was just like, oh, this is cool. Can't really speak or anything. Like, it might as well have been mute. It's kind of rude, actually, you know, like all these people are talking, they're having a good time, probably. Newfoundland's all like, well, we have our own made-up language, and we like to be our own country. So they did. They went off and they, not then, not in the 1860s, but they went off. What happened is actually Canada formed one of the first dominions in the British Empire, which pretty much meant it was a country in its own right, with its own system of government and self-governance inside the sphere of the British Empire and their influence. They, in turn, called their holiday January 1st Dominion Day, because it's the Dominion of Canada and all that nonsense. And afterwards, they existed, I guess. Later on, they changed the name to Canada Day, and the British Empire officially collapses and becomes a Commonwealth of Nations. And then there's the Commonwealth realms. Commonwealth of Nations are generally just nations that used to be part of the British Empire that are now republics or kingdoms, excluding the US. And then Commonwealth realms are 16 independent nations that share the same figurehead for the monarchy, and that is also part of what Canada is part of, because Queen Elizabeth II is Queen of Canada in Canadians' eyes, not Queen of the United Kingdom. She's also Queen of Australia, she's also Queen of New Zealand, she was Queen of South Africa, she was Queen of Pakistan, but not anymore. But in Canada's eyes, she is just Queen of Canada, and that is it. The House of Windsor is the Canadian royal family, and blah, 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 blah. The US gets to trade with Commonwealth realms, but they are not part of the Commonwealth nations or Commonwealth realms due to the fact that, I'm assuming, due to the fact that they separated violently, I would think. I mean, it wasn't really kind. The U.S. Revolution, we don't like taxes, so we're gonna dump your tea into the harbor, and then they turn around and implement their own tax systems, so, yay. No, it's fine. But, yeah, so anyway, talk about Newfoundland for a bit, because I don't want this video to completely just be a complete copy of Sunday's video. Newfoundland sat there all happy and existing. In 1901, it became its own dominion, like Canada, and they had their own list of prime ministers and all of that. And then they ran into a problem. And in the 30s, when the Great Depression occurred, they needed help from Britain, and so they actually revoked self-government, and the Dominion of Newfoundland ceased to exist by 1936, I believe, and they became another British colony again. And they existed like that throughout World War II, but by the end of World War II, it became too expensive for the British government to control Newfoundland. So in 1949, I guess there was a referendum, which Canadians are so happy to throw out everywhere. And this referendum simply stated, hey, Newfoundland, you country that couldn't make it, do you want to try again or join Canada in layman's terms? They did not have the option to stay within British colonial rule because Britain didn't want them anymore. I believe Britain was like, you know, you guys are too expensive, blah, 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 blah. All you do is fish, you have nicely colored houses, your language is strange, you have a new time zone just for yourself, but we can't deal with you. So the results were very, not a unanimous result, but it did end up in Newfoundland joining Canada. ironically, prior to the fall of the Dominion of Newfoundland, there was a border dispute between Quebec and Newfoundland over Labrador, and Newfoundland was favored. So it was the first territorial loss that Canada ever had. And it didn't matter in the end because, like, 20 or so years later, Newfoundland became part of Canada anyway. And in 2001, they changed the name officially from Newfoundland to Newfoundland and Labrador to give the Labradorians some power. So they still fight for their own provincial status, but there's no one that lives there who lives in Labrador. Their major city is Happy Valley Goose Bay. It's just a strange city sound. Anyway, they were the last province to be accepted into the Union, the Confederacy of Canada, and yeah. So, it's a little tidbit. Again, I don't really know where to start on these things, and I think as I decide to do more of these videos later on, I mean, I'm not always going to be doing these things. I just wanted to make a better video than the one I put out on Saturday, because Saturdays was a rushed idea. But I think once I get a better feel for this, I could probably make it more enjoyable. But anyway, thanks for watching, and check back next week. We always try to put out a video every Wednesday and Saturday. And until next time, goodbye.